Now, it's crazy to me. It's still crazy. I talked about how the True Detective Night Country score is inflated based on various reasons, including critics often don't see the whole season before writing a season review based on Rotten Tomatoes itself, choosing whether it's positive or negative without the critic actually having a say in that, unless the critic manually does. And then just sort of the social, cultural reasons. A lot of critics, I think, are afraid either of pissing off HBO or they're afraid of pissing off the fandom, and getting yelled at, which, if you're me, you certainly know what that's like. I've written an episodic review of every episode of this show. I've discussed at length the many things that I dislike about it. I've made videos about it, and I am still routinely called sexist, racist, you name it. It's constant. Every time I publish a new thing, that happens. And that's okay, whatever. It's obnoxious. But it is, I do think that, people are worried when they see, well, here's a show largely about indigenous Alaskans. It's unlike previous seasons of True Detective. It is totally female driven. I mean, obviously season 2 had a female detective in it also. But this one, both the detectives, except for the one that does all the work, Peter, are female. So you criticize this show and you run the risk, right? That's what they're going to default to. Because my theory at this point is that most defenders of Night Country don't actually have arguments. They don't actually have reasons that they like this show beyond, it's a mirror image of season 1. It takes all that masculine, chauvinistic crap and turns it on its head. I don't think that's very true, because I think that the female characters in this show display almost every possible trait of toxic masculinity you can find. So I think most people who are defending this show, the reason they're turning to personal attacks, to calling people like me sexist, or clearly you hate women. I think that's because there's just not a lot to defend about this show. I also think it's just this culture war bullshit that we have to deal with. Because the fact is, the show's really bad. But you see it in critics and in fans. Let's look at a couple. Crazily to me, Alan Sepinwall at Rolling Stone. The headline of his article reads, "True Detective Night Country just gave the series its best finale ever." I've read a lot of Sepinwall's work, and I often think he writes interesting and compelling criticism of TV, and I cannot follow this at all. I think every single season finale of True Detective, including season 2, is a better finale than this one. Even season 2, which is up until this point the most reviled of the seasons, has a finale where, some pretty crazy shit happens, and there's shootouts, and some of the characters die, and some of them live, and you kind of left with a cliffhanger. And I don't know, I'm gonna have to do a whole video on season 2, because I really didn't like it when it came out. I didn't even finish it, and now I've watched it sort of in conjunction with Night Country, and I liked it a lot more. I still have a lot of criticisms about season 2, but I liked it a lot more than I liked it the first time around. So that's another story for another time. I will say that looking over at Pajiba, another not as famous as Rolling Stone, but another entertainment website, Dustin Rolls writes a lot of stuff that I've also enjoyed over the years. But I find this piece that he wrote about Night Country just absolutely infuriating, frankly. True Detective Night Country, Eat Your Dreams Inside Out, Pizzolato. And he talks about how, things were going fine over at the True Detective Reddit Intel. And he says crazy shit, like Issa Lopez crushed this season of True Detective. And I say that as someone who thought the first season of True Detective, or at least the first 7 episodes, was one of the best seasons of TV of the last decade. Frankly, I'll just interject here, I thought the finale of season 1 was fantastic. I loved every episode of season 1. But then he a little bit further down, he talks about where is it? Oh yeah, actually it's a little bit further up. He says, in recent weeks, however, there's a place where that level of toxicity can still be found outside of Twitter, the True Detective subreddit. That subreddit seemed to approach the season cautiously, but mostly bought into the first episode and even seemed to appreciate some of the callbacks to the first season. Once it became clear, however, that True Detective's original creator, Nick Pizzolatto, didn't care for the season or appreciate the callbacks, the subreddit went south. As the internet is so fond of doing, it became a binary choice for the subreddit between those who liked Pizzolatto's True Detective and those who liked Issa Lopez's Night Country. An undercurrent of sexism and grievance politics played a role, and the subreddit quickly turned into, here's everything we hate about Night Country. It's petty and exhausting, but most of all, it's wrong. And fuck you very much. Sorry, I don't mean to be an asshole, but fuck you for writing that. That's some bullshit, Dustin Rolls. That is some petty ass culture war bullshit. You just basically told an entire Reddit that they're not allowed to dislike Night Country and that the only reason they do is because they're on Pizzolatto's side and don't like Issa Lopez and are sexists. And that is one of the most ridiculous things that a professional critic could possibly write. He's basically saying that none of the arguments that people have made, and there have been a lot of very valid arguments about the problems with Night Country from a lot of people who I know who are very progressive, a lot of people who are very female, who dislike this show for a lot of reasons. I read I'll have to find it. Let me see, Night Country, Rotten Tomatoes. I read a review from a very left-wing trans woman who it was extremely critical. Are we saying that this left-wing trans writer is, gung-ho, like True Detective Season 1 fangirl, and that the only reason that... Do you realize how crazy this starts to sound? Let's see, I'm scrolling the audience, or the critic reviews. There's me. Mine has a little green rotten thing. Everyone else is red. Oh, nope, here's one. Newsday's Vern Gay did not like it. Let's see. No. Oh, fresh. Oh, here it is. Drew Gregory from Astrostraddle. This is a very left-wing critique, right? True Detective Night Country is a cop show. If you thought a post-June 2020 True Detective would have anything to say about policing, you've mistaken the false promises of that summer as genuine. Once again, surface-level identity politics won over meaningful structural change. More and more, the cops on screen abusing their power get to be women, queer people, and people of color. This is supposed to be a win. But this Jodie Foster vehicle is not Silence of the Lambs. It is not an expertly crafted piece of media soured by its messaging of police propaganda. As a work of art, it's dull. This is often the case. Jonathan Demme's 1991 classic is the exception, not the rule. Most media that traffics in these same narratives finds little purpose other than this perpetuation. There is little in True Detective Night Country that's compelling, not the narrative, not the characters, not the form. It looks expensive and has some strong performances, but that is not enough to prop up all the mediocrity. And it goes on like that. The show is just as cliche in its portrayal of indigenous people. The case of the missing scientists ends up being tied to the epidemic of missing and murdered indigenous women, a topic that many seem to only care about as a storytelling device for their tales of hero cops and as an excuse to show dead indigenous people on screen. Lopez has said it was important for this not to be a story of white cops saving the day, but the primary arc of the show is still Danvers learning to mildly care about the indigenous people in her community, including her own stepdaughter. Navarro and her family experienced a lot of trauma related to their identity as indigenous people, but again and again the show prioritizes Navarro's chosen identity of cop. If her decision to fight back against the one cop abusing his power is meant to show a change, it feels hollow, given all that precedes and all that follows. Ultimately, I would rather watch a show where Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey swish around being so chauvinist cops than one that uses missing and murdered indigenous women and indigenous communities being poisoned by oil companies as a mere backdrop for the same boring cop tropes. There's nothing progressive about adopting real urgent issues into the folds of conservative fantasy. If you want to watch True Detective Night Country and feel your brain massaged by the simplicity of heroic police brutality and detectives who have to go rogue when they get shut down by the higher-ups, be my guest. Everything you watch doesn't have to be ethical, but don't slurp up that garbage and then pat yourself on the back because it pays lip service to issues that really matter. So, I'm not even going to say that like all of this is stuff I agree with. Like I'm probably, more of a fan of cop shows in general. I don't think they all have to be conservative fantasy. But what I do find absolutely absurd is this default that everyone turns to, that if you don't like this, if you don't like Night Country, you must be sexist. You must be right-wing. You must be racist. You must hate women. La-di-da-di-da-di-da. Here's what I say. If you like this show, you hate women. If you like Night Country, you hate women. How's that? How does that work? Does that work? If you like Night Country and it's atrocious portrayal of indigenous people, I mean, look at the end. Look at the finale. In the finale, we learned that these women who were like cleaning ladies and they worked at like the crab place, they were the ones who went and killed the scientists. They did it without the help of men. They did it as like rah-rah, go girl, badass women, but they're not even real characters. You barely know who any of them are or what they do for fun or, what their internal lives are like. They're just fill-ins. They're just brought in at the end and like, oh, here's the ones that did it. They're just these, mop up, clean up vigilante. They're nothing. They're given nothing. And that's supposed to be some big win for indigenous people and people who don't like the show are the ones who are racist and sexist. I don't know, but from where I'm sitting, it feels to me like if you liked this show, you probably hate women. And that's a joke, by the way. I don't tell people that if they don't like a show. I've been told on Twitter by people, if some white dude like me pops up on Twitter and is like, you just hate women because you don't like this show on TV, the entertainment product. I think that guy, you should probably not leave your drink around him because he's one of those fake feminist ally dudes who only gets laid by acting like he cares about women's causes. But he's literally saying that if you don't like this show, you must hate women. Well, how does that apply to women who don't like this show? I wouldn't have the fucking nerve to go and say that because of your skin color or what you got between your legs or whatever means you do or don't like something. Because I know a lot of women who don't like Night Country. And obviously there are men who do. And I don't think that those men like women any more than I do, or that the women who don't like Night Country have some weird internalized misogyny. You just sometimes don't like something. Maybe you don't think it's well written. Maybe you don't connect with the characters. I personally think this is an objectively bad show, poorly written to the point where I'm baffled that anyone would like it. But if you do like it, I don't actually think that's because you have something wrong with you or the way you feel about people based on their gender or their race or whatever else. And outside of a very small group of people, I think that most people who dislike this show, also, it's not because they hate women. It's not because they don't like Native Americans or have some weird beef against Alaska. It's because they didn't like the story, the acting, the structure, whatever. So I think if this is your line, if this is where you're headed, if you come into a debate over a show or a movie and your default is to say, oh, you clearly don't like women, I don't believe that you even actually like the thing you're defending. I think you're just participating in a culture war that makes you feel like you can walk around waving your dick everywhere, treating people like shit, and still feel good about it. You can still feel like you're the good guy, you're the hero, because it's these bad people, these bad, deplorable people who don't like the thing you like, and they don't like it, not for any valid reason, but because they are somehow subhuman, and so you get to treat them like shit. You don't even have to like the show. All you have to do is not like the people who don't like the show. And that's just kind of the worst way that we've become as a society. This instinct to just demonize and create less human classes of people based on stupid shit like a TV show or a video game or whatever. So I hate to see it when we see it from a critic, from someone who's supposed to be a professional critic who goes and says that the Reddit is toxic now, not because people have valid criticisms, but because of sexism. I think that's a shameful thing to write, and I think that he should be ashamed of writing it. And when it comes to the whole like best finale ever in True Detective history, I just wonder if maybe Alan Sepinwall fell and bumped his head on something. But at least he's not calling, fans women haters or whatever. So, yeah. Thank you for watching. Again, I've had kind of a bit of a health thing lately, so I'm a little low energy. Forgive me. I'm bouncing back, hopefully, and I appreciate your continued support and like, subscribe. Be sure to shout out some comments down below. Let me know how much I hate women in the comments. So, peace. Oh, sorry. P.S. A weird connection between this show and Fear the Walking Dead is in the 8th season of Fear the Walking Dead, there was this whole segment where a teenage girl kills herself to sort of save other people. And I don't mean like sacrifices herself heroically. She literally just kills herself. And it's this sort of glorification of suicide. And she's a teenage girl, which personally, that really struck a nerve with me. I find glorification of suicide to be really sort of terrible, and especially in certain communities. I think there are ways to handle like discussions around suicide or like, end of life stuff that can portray suicide as not always a terrible thing, right? Theoretically, I'm just saying that's a discussion that can be had. But glorification of suicide is a big, big no-no in my book. And the final thing I will say here is that they really glorify the fuck out of suicide for all these people in Ennis who walk out of the ice, and at the end with Navarro in particular, who I think, it's a little ambiguous. Does she kill herself? Does she leave? Is it just blah, But I think it's pretty much set up that she is following her mother and sister off into the ice to die, and that it's almost this heroic, romanticized thing, and I think that's just awful, especially because suicide rates in indigenous communities are really high, and it's, a lot of it's tied to alcoholism and poverty and abuse and everything else. And I think just treating it with this sort of, again, this almost noble savage glibness is really fucked up. But I'm still not going to tell you that you like suicide or that you're rooting for indigenous people to kill themselves because you like this show. See, that's the difference between you and me. If you liked the show, I'm just going to assume you liked it because you found it to be a good mystery, that for whatever reason you enjoyed the characters. Whereas, I'm told routinely that I don't like it for all these reasons that have nothing to do with it. I mean, yeah, I guess not having likable characters is a problem, but it's not because they're women. It's because they're poorly written. So, right, that's all I have to say about that. Peace.